that, we will launch into the admin training here and see if we can't show you guys a few things. So I'm already logged in here on the Connect Director dashboard. As you can see, this is the newer interface, very, very simple, easy to read. And so the first thing I want to show you is the, let's just talk about basic user management. So we're going to create a new user. So we're going to go to the wrench here. You'll see here, very logical, right? Users. We click on users. You'll see guess I timed out while we were logged back in here. All right, so now we're back in. We're in the user area, and you'll see here we have two panes of glass. The top pane is a listing of all the users. The bottom are the details. Just want to point out here over on the right, we've got this icon where you can increase and expand. So if I want to make the bottom full size, we can do that. And then I can go back the other way as well and re-expand the top tab. So let's say that we want to create a new user. I'm just going to go ahead and go to new at the top here. And then we're going to, let's say we're going to create a user for David. That's Don's son. He helped here over the summer as helping Don. Don called him his executive assistant. So we'll create an extension for him. I'm going to go ahead and add the domain here. And we have a couple of options here. In the case of David, where he's part-time, we don't really want people being able to dial him directly. We can exclude him from the system directory. And we can also check this box to make his extension private. You'll see here we've got options to enable DID. So if we want to give him a DID, we can check that box. It'll show you the range of available, or again, in this case, we're going to uncheck it because we don't want him to have one. We've got this PSTN failover option. This comes into play when you have multi-site locations and you need to ensure that folks can, if you want them to be able to have PSTN failover in the event of a WAN failure, you can turn that on. License types, right? These are your standard extension mailbox, extension only mailbox, and then the level of client, if they're a work group, so on. But basically what I've done now is essentially all you need to do to create the user. So I'm going to click save here. And David, you see, is now in the directory here. And when you create a user in ShoreTel, it's all integrated. That is set up his voicemail box. He will have to customize his greetings, but that's, he's completely ready to rock and roll. You just need to assign him to a phone and he's good to go. So that is, let me check the questions here, see if we got any questions so far. No questions, good. So the next thing I want to talk about is the user groups, right? So you see here on the left, we've got the user group section. I can click on that. And there are two kind of components to managing features and functionality. There are user groups and there is what they call class of service. And so I'll walk you through the details of each one and how it works. You can see here in the top pane of glass, we've got multiple user groups. Our normal one, this VCI users, is kind of our primary, but I do want to point out we've created some other ones for testing. So like Don's got one for testing, Paul's got one, we've got one called test. And the logic here is if you want to go in and experiment, obviously you don't want to do that on the live system. So let's walk through some of the settings in the VCI users section here. And I'll just go through here. So max call stack depth that's the number of calls you can juggle simultaneously. Max buddies per user is that's your number of users that you can talk to or have in the Connect client, right? So that's your internal on the ShoreTel system. This max private contacts is the number of Outlook Outlook contacts, and so the default is 3,000. You can set that higher, and the one caveat that we'll give you if you do increase that is if the user has Outlook integration turned on, then it will take a minute, at the beginning when they first log in to sync all those contacts. So there will be a little bit of a performance hit when they first launch the Connect software. So just want to remind everybody of that. And then we've got, as you can see, a ton of other very granular options here: allow call pickup, allow trunk-to-trunk transfers, overhead and group paging, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you have questions on what any of this means, we can go over here in the upper left to this, they look like the spines of books, and click on documentation. And you'll see here this Mitel Doc Center. You can click on that, and it takes you out to the Mitel site, and then you'll see all of the relevant documentation for the Connect platform. You can drill in and find what you're looking for. So they make it very easy to get to the admin guide. It's I think the last one I looked at was about 700 pages long, but of course you can go in and use the PDF search functionality to dig around and find what you're looking for. So those are your options in the VCI users, that section. And then I want to scroll down a little further, and you'll see here we've also got options for whether you're going to allow people to silent monitor, silent coach. I got a little out of sync here, bear with me. I thought somewhere in here was the voice, oh, I'm sorry, voicemail settings are on separate. Let me go back over here. So in regards to their actual mailbox, we can assign them different types of mailboxes, right? So we've got predefined boxes, small, medium, large. You can set the length on the mailbox for, up to 3,600 seconds. We've got ours set to 480, which is about 8 minutes. You can also set a separate, that would be for inbound, right? People leaving a voicemail. You can also set an option for outbound. So if you're doing the broadcast using voicemail as a broadcast, you can set a separate limit for that as well. So you can see there we've got that set much higher. And then the last thing I want to show you on this section is let's go ahead and create a new user group. So we'll go back to user groups. We're going to go up here to the top and click create. And then we're going to call this training test. And you'll see here we've got class of service that I mentioned before. These have already been built out, but for now we're going to just choose fully featured. You've got class of service for the call permissions. So again, you can see here we could do local only. You can allow long distance or no restrictions. I'll show you a little bit more on this in a second. And then of course, like we just talked about, large mailbox settings. And then the other thing down here at the bottom is your trunk access, right? So we've got multiple trunk groups, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. You can have different trunk groups. Our primary is a PRI through Cox, and we have a backup through Ringleader, and then we also have SIP trunks for our mobility. So this is where you would add, right, if we want to give them access to just the Cox PRI and the Ringleader as the backup, we just click the slider arrow button there, add them to the list, and it's as easy as that. So let's save. And now we've got a training test feature here, as you can see, and we could of course go in and edit that as necessary as well. So don't see any questions yet on any of that. So the next thing we want to show you is the, again, the class of service. So let's go into the training. I'm going to actually use the one that Don created previously, which is the training group here. And just want to walk you through again I think we already talked about the call stack, and the buddies. We talked about the voicemail permissions. Okay, actually, yeah, let's go on to, I think I've covered everything I want to cover in here. Let's go on to the call control and the hunt groups. So for call control, and this is where we're going to configure basic call routing, right? We're going to go to features, call control, then you'll see an option here for hunt groups. This is probably the most commonly used, basic functionality on the system. And you'll see here we've got multiple hunt groups. So let's say that we want to create, or actually, I'm going to do our help desk for now. Let's look at the help desk. So you'll see here for the hunt group, you can assign it an extension. You can also assign a backup extension. So you can see here we've got Paul, the service manager, as the backup. So if something isn't working for whatever reason with the hunt group, the calls will go to his extension. You can assign it to whatever switch you need to. So you just pick, you can see there we've got the available switches. Now the reason they have you pick a specific switch, and we want to give you guys kind of a cautionary tale on this hunt groups, is that there are limitations to hunt groups on switches. And so what I mean by that is in the past, we've had clients, obviously they get in here, they see how easy it is to create new hunt groups, and they go crazy and add a bunch of hunt groups, which is great in terms of it, wanting to make the system do what they need to do. But the downside is there is a limitation of 16 hunt groups per switch. And the director will not tell you when you have surpassed that limitation. And so what happens is if you go beyond the 16 hunt group limitation per switch, it causes some very glitchy, unpredictable system behavior. It's not good. And so what we can do, we just want to, again, make sure that you don't exceed the limitations. But if you do, there's a workaround if you have VMware, and that is we can create a vPhone switch, right? So you can create a virtual switch, and you can use resources on that for the hunt group the same way you would for a physical, but there's no licensing cost for that. Of course, there's no hardware cost because it's physical, and there's no licensing cost. And so that's a great workaround to make sure that you can do what you need to do in terms of the hunt groups. So the other thing, if I can get here, was in regards to hunt groups, as you know, or maybe you don't, we've got top-down, the ability to ring top-down, and we've got the ability to do simultaneous ring. You can see here, you can plug in the number of rings per member, the number, no answer number of rings rather, and where the call is going to go. So this checkbox for skip member if already on a call, that means, right, if they're engaged, if they're in the simul ring, it's not going to ring them if they're already on a call. And this call member, when forwarding all calls, that would be if the person is in a situation where they have their phone set to forward calls to another person, this would, if you check this box, it still calls them. It wouldn't get forwarded to the person that they've got the calls forwarded to. And again, just remember, if you get lost or have any questions, the documentation link is just right up here. It's only a click away, and you can go take a look. So let me double check on the question situation. Almost there, Trey. So the very next thing I want to show you in here is in regards to the standard ShoreTel or Mitel Connect reporting rather. So we're going to go up here to the reports icon, and you can see the cool little arrow thing. So that's the reports. I'm going to click on that. And out of the box, the Mitel comes with a dozen reports. You can have it pull up to or store up to 2,000 days worth of data, right? We've got ours set to 1 year. The one thing I do want to point out here is I could change this to 2,000 right now, but we're still only going to have 365 days of data. So the change is when you change this, it's going forward. It doesn't go backwards. So just bear that in mind when we first set up your system, if you want, or when you get in there for the first time, if you want that level of or that much detail, go ahead and set it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things in the ShoreTel reporting because we find that most of our clients use the Brightmetrics solution, which is a lot more powerful. But I do want to show you what comes out of the box with the ShoreTel. And so one of the most common asks, it's almost, I guess, just about everybody now is on voice over IP systems. But 10 years ago, when they weren't quite so common, this reporting was a super big deal. And so one of the most common asks is, hey, we want to see, call volume for a couple of people, or in some cases, they want to drill in and check a particular user because the management thinks that they're abusing the phone, spending hours and hours on the phone with their significant other or something like that. So I just want to show you very quickly here on the ShoreTel side or Mitel side how easy it is to run a summary on a couple of users. So let's add, we'll add Don's extension. And, oh, I'm sorry. That is not what I want. I'm in the wrong, we need user activity. So that was just so you know, that was the account code section where you can actually create account codes. So if you're an attorney and you're doing billing for clients and things like that, you can create account codes. But I want to run a user activity summary. So I'm going to click add here, 1450. And then I'm going to click add again. And we'll put in 1460, which is John. They're probably two of our highest call volume users. And then what I'll do is, let's say since the beginning of the month in December 12/1 to 12/17, nice short interval. You'll notice here at the bottom we've got an option to show internal calls. I'm going to leave that unchecked so we just see external calls. Click run report. Oop. What I miss here? Oh, I got to populate both. Sorry. All right, so there's a summary report for both John and Don. You can see here inbound, outbound, total. It gives you the time, everything you need that at a high level. Again, that's a summary. If we wanted to, we could do a detail, right? So let's say that, again, we were talking about the manager or management wants to review a particular individual's phone calls, again, looking for, how much are they spending too much time on the phone with the spouse or something like that. We can just go in here and we'll put in, again, we'll use Don's extension and from the first of the month, run the report. And you'll see here, this is all of his call information, who he dialed. And you can see here, right, originate means he called out, pick up means they called in. So you could just look, if you knew the phone number of the person, the girlfriend or the boyfriend, you could go through that and find it. Now, as you can see, you can dump these out to Excel, but they're pretty straightforward, black and white, not very pretty. So what I want to show you next is the Brightmetrics solution that integrates. Let me check for questions here. We're good. The Brightmetrics solution, which integrates with the Mitel Connect platform. And this is just a really, really great tool. So what we're looking at here is our new, the new Brightmetrics Radiance interface. And a lot of great, we're on the dashboards tab now. You see here on the left, we've got reports, and we've also got a thing for call flow. So the first thing I want to show you, and probably the most common request that we get in terms of tracking or quality is, you know, the business gets a phone call from somebody, the person calls in later and says, hey, you know, I was on hold for 20 minutes. I had to talk to 5 different people. Nobody could solve my problem. You know, one of those types of calls that kind of no business owner or manager wants to get. And so what you can do is the Brightmetrics makes it very, very easy to see exactly what happened in real time on that call. And so what we're going to do is down here, you see we've got this call detail report. And I'm going to click on party names. So let's say that, for instance, we're going to look at Brian Picard. He's one of our engineers. And we can run a filter on his activity. And then I already looked prior to this just to look at some of his calls. And I found one that had a few hops, you know, nothing significant, but I just want to show you the kind of the level of detail that you can get. And so we're going to scroll down to a call that he had yesterday at 9:51, and we just click this little expand the detail plus button. And you can see here, it was almost an hour-long call. It came in on the main work group and hit the auto attendant for 6 seconds, hit the help desk for a second. Jenna managed the first part of the call for 7 minutes. And then that call ended up with Brian for a grand total of 50 minutes. Somebody just joined and they're not muted, so I don't know how to address that. Okay, so you can see there the detail, and if there's a recording associated with that call, you can click right here on recordings and just click the play button and listen to that. So on the Brightmetrics interface, very, very easy to see exactly what happened with the call all the way through, listen to the recording, you know, find out exactly what happened. Was the client exaggerating, or did in fact you have some issues with the call? The other thing we can do is if you want to go search, you know, again, just on a particular caller ID number, right? So again, customer says, hey, I've called in, you know, X number of times, nobody's ever called me back. You can say, okay, let's confirm, you know, that the person actually called. So we can scroll down and you'll see here, we've got a search by caller ID. And we just click here on this button, caller ID, enter a value. And if we plug in, let's use Don's cell phone, for instance, we can see, click run report. And this will show us all of his calls on the system for the last 7 days. So we can see here inbound calls, you know, whether they were work group or non-work group, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see exactly when they called. Again, you can get the level of detail. You know, if you like, you just click the plus button and it'll show you exactly what happened with that call. So that's another very common thing. Now, the other thing that Brightmetrics is great for is the, just get out of that, is in terms of system configuration. And so we use this a lot to make sure, kind of to sanity check clients' call flows and things, make sure that we don't have issues with open-ended call flows and things where the user gets stuck in a situation where they can't do something. So I want to show you the call flow reporting, which is really cool. And what's really neat about this is it will take into account any of your schedules. And so if you have holiday schedules in effect, you can actually choose the date that the holiday schedule would be in effect, and it'll show you the what the call flow looks like for that. But for now, we're just going to use today. We're going to go to our VCI main. That's our primary auto attendant. And I'm going to click view. And you'll see here we have this great graphical representation of our entire call flow from start to finish. And you can use this again to make sure that you've got all the bases covered. And you can see it's pretty pretty big, so consequently pretty small, but we can zoom in if we want to zero in on a particular part. And you'll see here, again, we've got hunt groups showing on here. We use the Mitel Enterprise Contact Center, but we use hunt groups as a backup for that. And so that's why, you know, you've got, these are sales hunt groups, so we've also got hunt groups for the service to back up the contact center. So very cool. If you've got Brightmetrics and you haven't done one of these, you should definitely do one and take a look at it and make sure everything is the way you want it. But just very helpful to be able to view everything visually like that. And then the last thing I want to show you is the, you've also got a very neat way to view, to find, if you want to find references to elements, things like that, go back to the reports here. And we've got this report called Extension References All. If I click on that, we can actually plug in a, I'm going to plug in a name, right? So I'm going to use Don again because I know he's in here quite a bit. But let's say that we wanted to find every reference to Don in the entire system. I'm going to hit this, run this search. And this is going to show us every place where he appears on a button mapping, anything. You can see here, this copy of Don Gulling is a user that they created in one of the prior trainings. So this basically shows you anywhere his name is mentioned in the entire system. So if for some reason you're trying to do some system cleanup or locate any phantom type objects, this is where you would go to do that. All right. I'm going to, that's all I had for the pre-planned content. So I'm going to unmute the phones here and see, I don't see any questions in the queue. We're pretty much right on time. So here we go. Everybody be prepared. I'm going to unmute all.
This will be an interesting experiment. So Matt, thanks for sharing all that. I appreciate it. One of the things that I'd be curious of is if anybody had posted any questions in addition to the ones that you answered earlier about reporting. That seemed to be the kind of #1 topic, but you covered it really well, I thought, with your couple of scenarios you laid out there.
So yeah, actually the only other question I see in the queue specifically was about Brightmetrics, and the question was, is it an extra cost? And the answer is yes. The Brightmetrics is an annual subscription. It's based on the size, you know, number of users or number of ECC agents. They've got three different offerings, but it's very, very reasonable and very, as you can see, very powerful. So, and again, going back to what we mentioned before, a lot of our clients that run the enterprise contact center, they actually manage it from the Brightmetrics interface. They really don't even use the Mitel ECC interface so much.
So while we, two things on Brightmetrics, and I'm glad that was brought up. It is a monthly cost as well. So you could do monthly instead of annual, and then you can cancel at any time. So we want to make it just as easy as possible. It's already fairly affordable, but if you don't want to do an annual subscription now, you don't have to. You can just pay by month. It's a few bucks a month. Cancel at any time. Demo is free for 3 weeks. We're glad to set that up for you. Jeff can set it all up, do a demo with your data, let you see if you like it or not. If you like it, keep it for a few bucks a month. If you don't like it, cancel at any time. If you do love it and you want to stick with it for a year, if you prepay for a year, you do save a little bit of money. But you can now go month to month and cancel at any time.
Yep. And okay, just so everybody knows, I tried to unmute everybody and it gave me a message that we've exceeded the maximum number of people we can unmute. So I guess if you've got a question, definitely type it in the box, because I'm afraid we're missing out on people that might otherwise ask verbally. Okay, we'll give it just
so the next webinar. So if you don't have another question, just make sure we let everybody know that we've already published our dates now for the 2020 webinar series, and we'll make sure you get a email link so you can register for any of them in 2020. We've put the whole calendar out there. We're alternating them between Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're alternating them between the mornings and the afternoons. That feedback that you gave us, we appreciate that. So that if you've got a conflict, you can potentially join the next one. We're also fully committed to making sure we record all these, post them all up on our YouTube channel so it can be watched at any time later. And then last thing, I'll ask Jeff to send out an email to you to see if there's any interest specifically in just a contact center webinar focused solely on contact center. So be prepared to look for that email from Jeff. We'd love your feedback, and if you want to do that, we'll definitely do it.
So Don, here's we got a question that came through asking about the advantages to Active Directory integration. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I'm glad you asked it. There's a couple of kinds of Active Directory integration, actually. It's not simple as an on-off. There's a regular AD integration for passwords. There's also an Active Directory two-way sync tool that's an add-on tool that's an app from the Mitel Pro Services team. So the built-in free capability, it's a toss-up, honestly. Here's what I would say. If everyone that has an account on your system is going to have a phone as well, then it's okay to have. Basically what happens is you create an Active Directory user account. It then creates it on the Mitel side, passing through some of the AD information. Then you still have to go back and populate the rest of it yourself. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that, and the only reason is because creating a user, as Matt showed you, is already super easy anyway, frankly. And if you use the AD tool, you're still going to have to fill in almost all that information. That said, once you set up the new user, you can still do AD sync for their password, and that's my preferred method. So what I prefer to do, and what I think that we recommend the most often, is set up the user using the regular short tail setup process, and then just sync their password from AD. That way, you've got improved cybersecurity because now their client password to the Connect client is synced with their Active Directory password. User doesn't have to change it. They don't have to log into the client. It's all seamless pass-through. So I am a fan of that. Not a huge fan of the process of having Microsoft create a Mitel account for you, only because it doesn't gather a lot of information, as you know, from AD, which is very basic, and you still have to populate it all in the Mitel anyway. The last thing I'll say is the two-way sync tool. It's pretty good. We find it really works best in a large organization where there's a lot of changes, where people are constantly, coming in and going out or moving around. So I'd love to, address that for you one-on-one. So Matt, definitely send me that question in the email, and I'll reply back with all the details. But hopefully that it gives you some additional information.
Great. Yeah, and we've actually got a couple of more really good ones here that just came through. So next one is, if we have a different business intelligence tool, is it possible to get the Mitel information into other tools?
Totally. Yes, absolutely. You can definitely do that. Matter of fact, one of our largest clients, it's a 53 location, large enterprise with a huge contact center. They use their own BI, and we help them set it up. So you can definitely do that a couple of ways. One way, with the core phone system data, it stores it in a MySQL database, and we have the database definitions and tables for that, so you can query it. We always recommend that you create a copy of the MySQL and query the copy, not production, just because you don't want to interfere with any call operations on the production system while it's in production. So yes, you can do that. So that's on the core data for the regular phone system side. On the contact center side, it's got its own database, as you may know if you have a contact center in ECC. And yes, you can integrate that with a separate BI or analytics tool as well. And it's a similar process. The benefit of ECC data, though, is it's already a copy. So yes, you can. If you have contact center, you just query the copy. We have all the database definitions for that. And if you want to query the core phone system reporting for non-contact center users, you can do that as well. We just ask that you do it off the, use a copy of the MySQL instead of querying real-time production. And those data definitions, data tables, and all that, that's all a published document. Glad to give it to you, both for core phone system and for ECC.
Great. All right, we've got another one. When discussing 16 limit for hunt groups on switches, you mentioned virtual switches can be added as an option with no license charge. Are there any disadvantages to adding the VM switches as long as we have the resources for the VM appliance?
No. You know, my number one recommendation, and I'm, you know, hopefully this comes from a lot of experience. That 16 limit, it's actually not even that's not even a hard limit. It could be lower than that, because the hunt groups use what's called real-time capacity on the legacy, you know, the Mitel switches and the short-tail switches. That real-time capacity goes down every time you add something like literally monitored extensions, pickup groups. All those things deplete your real-time capacity. So you could potentially have a switch with a lot of those things on there, pickup groups, monitored extensions, and so on, have a depleted real-time capacity that now you can only put 4 hunt groups on there. So in Brightmetrics, Matt, we can show a system health report that'll tell you the actual real-time capacity of all the things that are configured on that switch. And so you can always stay underneath it. And if it's red, we can adjust it. But specifically on the vSwitch, no, there are no negative consequences to adding a vSwitch, specifically if you want to use it for things like hunt groups, pickup groups, monitored extensions, and things like that that don't require a license. Another benefit is you can spin up another vSwitch, another free one, leave it empty with nothing on it, and in Director we can set it up as a spare for phones. And if ever a hardware switch fails, the phones will automatically fail over to the vSwitch, at which point they will consume a virtual phone license. That is not free, but Mitel gives us 45 days to rectify that licensing. So essentially, you can have a free redundant switch as well as other free vSwitches for things like hunt groups and anything else that uses real-time capacity. So highly recommended to do that, and really no downside.
Okay, and then last question is a specific system programming type question, and that is, how would I set up voicemail for a hunt group? So Don, I've got the test hunt group up, and I'm looking at the rings per member, no answer number of rings, and you would plug in the extension of the voicemail you want it to go to in the call forward destination. So you can see here on the screen, if no destination is specified, when the call stack is full, it's going to play a busy tone. If you put a voicemail box extension, it's going to go there. And then the same thing with the no answer. So you just need to, in that hunt group, you're going to go in and populate that call forward destination for that hunt group.
Well, that's one. Yeah, that's definitely a good answer, Matt, and I'm glad you shared that question. And thanks for whoever submitted it. I would also just add my own 2 cents on that and say, if you want a hunt group to have a voicemail, you probably want a work group instead, for lots of reasons. Work groups have their own voicemail boxes for the group, and then workgroup members can all see in their own client if there are messages in there or not, if they've been checked or not. You know, a lot of benefits there. With a hunt group, basically, if no one answers it, it goes to the voicemail box. But a person has to be, you know, someone has got to know to go check that box. And typically, that's a single person that does it. Whereas with a work group, you could potentially have multiple people cover the same mailbox. So that could be a benefit for you. So please, you know, let us know or email me or Matt directly what your specific situation is, or I'd be glad to jump on a call with you and tell you a work group might be better in that scenario.
Absolutely. All right, and then Don, I don't think we can do this one at the moment, or at least I'm not sure how. Is the can we show the process for syncing with the AD password?
You can. It's right in the. I'm in a car, so I can't show you myself. But Matt, if you're there in the user, whenever you pull up a regular user, it's right at the top, right where their password is. You'll actually see a little button there, and if it's not
right here,
available, it's right there.
Yeah, I was thinking the two-way for some reason. So okay, got it.
The two-way is a different thing, but to sync from AD, it's just right there. I mean, it's super simple. So just click a button and you're done.
So yeah, you like I say, select the user from the top, and then you can see right here in the very first pane, sync from AD.
Yeah, very easy. And just remember, the password sync keeps the password in the client of Communicator or Connect client and the Windows domain password the same password, and that's a free, easy to do, very simple process.
Okay, I think that looks like all the questions that we've received. So we're, like I say, right on time. Great questions, guys. And like I say, be sure to check the website, the events page there to see upcoming events and the recorded past events. Don, do you have anything else in closing?